fellow dignitaries, thank you all for joining 49th Annual National Conference of Indian Association of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation 2021, organized by Tamil Nadu chapter. So the theme of the conference is Emerging Trends and Concepts in Rehabilitation Medicine. So we have many speakers who have joined from overseas and across India, and all the delegates from all over India. Welcome back once again, and we will be having a very fruitful session. Here, all the speakers will be sharing their knowledge to enhance our mental horizon. So, before starting the session, I will request all the delegates to communicate or to post your questions through, we can find two options there: discuss tab and Q&A tab to the right of your floor platform. So you can raise your questions there, and our moderators, our chairpersons, will be helping you to connect with the speakers and to answer your questions. So thank you so much for everyone for joining here. So with that, we'll be moving on to the session, and it's my privilege inviting the chairperson for the session, who is the founder and director of Indian Federation of Neuro Rehabilitation, executive committee member of Indian Association of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. He is also a consultant in rehabilitation medicine, specialist in neurological rehabilitation, and director of Center for Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at Kokilaban Hospital, Mumbai. He is the first who has done PhD in neurology.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Abhishek, for joining us.
So we start the session. There's some change in plans. Dr. Harshanan will speak first. We got some technical issues with Dr. Jimmy. Harshanan is going to speak on practice standards of diabetic foot care.
Okay, so can I invite Dr. Harshanan, sir,
please.
with your permission?
Yeah, please.
So Dr. Harshanan Popalwar, as Abhishek sir has mentioned, he works as a specialist doctor at he is an assistant professor at AIMS Nagpur, and he has also worked as specialist doctor at VMMC and Safdarjung Hospital. He has done his MBBS, MD, DNB, MNAMS, PGDHM, and FDFM. So he has membership in National Academy of Medical Sciences, India, International Society of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. He also have membership at Indian Association of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation and membership at Indian Podiatry Association. So his areas of interest lies in pulmonary rehabilitation, diabetic foot management, neuro rehabilitation, and pediatric rehabilitation. With this note, I would like to invite Dr. Harshanan Popalwar over to the dais to speak on the topic practice standards of diabetic foot care. And I request our chairperson, Dr. Abhishek, to give a formal introduction and invite our speaker. Thank you.
So we all know Harshanan for his good work he has done for the IIPMR website, and I kindly invite Harshanan to give his talk. Harsha, please.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Today I shall be presenting the practice standards of diabetic foot care. Topics which I am going to cover today is introduction, then need of practice standards or guidelines, review of available practice guidelines or standards, then details about International Working Group of Diabetic Federation 2019 guidelines, then few aspects about Indian guidelines, and finally AMR perspective. So as you all know, India is the diabetes capital of the world. This is a data published by International Diabetic Federations in 2020, and they said that 463 million people have diabetes in the world, and in Southeast Asia this figure is around 88 million, and out of that 88 million, 77 millions belongs to India. Then what is the need of practice standards or guidelines? This is Indian data published in 2017, and this is a review meta-analysis article by Ghosh P et al. Out of 62 million diabetic people in India, 25% develops diabetic foot ulcers, of which 50% become infected, 20% need amputations. Diabetic foot ulcers contribute approximately 80% of all non-traumatic amputations in India annually. If you see the cost, expenditure, and time duration, average time to heal of diabetic foot ulcers in India especially is approximately 28 weeks. Then if you see the cost analysis, the very high cost is essential, especially for salvage followed by foot amputation. The cost is approximately 1,80,000, or if the foot is neuroischemic, then cost is approximately 1,40,000. Moreover, 50% of diabetic foot ulcer patients who get amputated once suffer another amputations within next 2 years. And the patients with history of diabetic foot ulcers have 40% higher 10-year death rate than those without. Another thing is, in India, diabetic foot is most ignored aspect. The reason is multiple, like social, religious, economical compulsions, and most of the people walk barefoot. Poverty and lack of education is another adding factors. And home remedies before visit. Patients also try home remedies before visiting their physicians. It is estimated that 90% of diabetic patients in India do not see a specialist in their lifetime. And problem is further worsened by alternative medicine therapies, prescribers, informal cares, and etc. etc. So diabetic foot ulcers. So there is a need of time to have a standard specific guidelines or practice standards and cost-effective therapies along with interdisciplinary team approach for the to be implemented so that this diabetes catastrophic foot ulcers morbidity as well as mortality can be halted. So let's have a few discussion about this available guidelines or practice standards. Internationally, multiple guidelines are available. Few of them are really quite nice and widely practiced. This includes the NICE guidelines published in January 2020, that is prevention and management of diabetic foot. Then International Working Group on Diabetic Foot. This is IWGDF 2019 guidelines. Then Government of India published one draft in 2016. It's named Standard Treatment Guidelines in Diabetic Foot Prevention and Management in India. As this International Working Group on Diabetic Foot is very famously and widely practiced guidelines, I shall be explaining a little more about these guidelines. International Working Group on Diabetic Foot was created in 1996. These are the only international and multidisciplinary guidelines that are produced through a rigorous scientific process undertaken by all healthcare professionals all across the world, and these are the guidelines adopted in multiple countries in multiple languages. So this is the cover page. This is 2020. They generally update guidelines every 4 yearly. So this is basically divided into 3 components. One is a practical guideline, the summary of all things. Then 6 guideline chapters, and then how they have developed. So let us see one by one. These are the 6 chapters in the guidelines. The one is with guidelines on prevention of foot ulcers. Then for offloading of foot ulcers. Then diagnosis, prognosis, and management of peripheral artery disease patients with foot ulcers. Then diagnosis and treatment of foot infections. Then interventions to enhance healing of foot ulcers. And finally, classification of diabetic foot ulcers. So before we proceed little in bit in depth about this International Working Group on Diabetic Foot, there is a risk classification 2019 which is essential to understand. This includes, they have 4 categories. Category 0, that is ulcer risk is very low, and characteristic is no loss of protective sensation or no peripheral arterial disease. In category low, either loss of protective sensation or peripheral arterial disease. In category 2, that is moderate, loss of protective sensation or peripheral arterial disease, or either of two with foot deformity. And in category 3, that is very high, loss of protective sensation or peripheral arterial disease plus history of foot ulcer or lower extremity amputation or end stage renal disease. So let us elaborate more. I have tried to describe the important guideline aspects among each chapter. So we'll start with first prevention of foot ulcers. So what are the recommendations? We are supposed to examine risk 0 category person annually for any signs or symptoms of loss of protective sensation or peripheral arterial disease. Then a person with diabetes at risk of foot ulceration, that is risk 1 to 3, a history of foot ulceration with diabetic foot complications. We are supposed to repeat the screening every 6 to 12 months. Then for those classified at risk 1, then risk 2 for every 3 to 6 months, and was risk 3 onwards every month. Then we are supposed to instruct the person not to walk barefoot. Then person is supposed to self-monitor for the abnormality of skin temperatures. Then orthotic intervention is supposed to be considered in case of abundant callus or person is having diabetes with risk of foot ulcerations. Then the person with healed plantar ulcer, that is risk 3, he is supposed to use therapeutic footwear throughout his life. Then in case a plantar forefoot ulcer that has failed to heal with non-surgical treatment, then we are supposed to follow this Achilles tendon lengthening or joint arthroplasty or single or pan-metatarsal osteoplasty only after once the active ulcer is healed to prevent further future ulceration. Let's go with the offloading foot ulcers. This is quite important and interesting for a physiatrist point of view. Then what are the different recommendations? Neuropathic plantar foot, forefoot or midfoot ulcer. The first line of recommendation is non-removable knee-high offloading device, as you can see in the picture, and most commonly used as well total contact scar or non-removable knee-high walker. Then in case of this non-removable is contraindicated, then removable knee-high offloading walker with an appropriate foot interface device is advisable. Again, if the removable is also contraindicated, then high ankle foot orthosis is advisable as a third choice. Again, high ankle foot orthosis also contraindicated, then person with forefoot or midfoot ulcer should consider using felted foam in combination with appropriately fitting conventional or standard therapeutic footwear as a fourth choice. Then a person with diabetes or neuropathic plantar metatarsal ulcers, we should consider using the Achilles tendon lengthening or metatarsal head resection or joint arthroplasty if non-surgical offloading treatment fails. In case of digital ulcers, especially on the toe ulcers, and it is secondary to the contracture deformity of the flexor, then digital flexor tenotomy is to be advisable. Then if the foot ulcer is infected, in case of mild infection, we can again use the non-removable. In case of mild to moderate infection, removable knee-high offloading device. But in case of severe infections, then our first priority is to be treat the infection and not for the offloading. Then for heel ulcers, again non-removable knee-high offloading device, either removable or non-removable depending upon the patient's condition. And in case of person with non-plantar foot ulcer, for example, foot on the ulcer on the dorsum of the foot or any other device, non-plantar ulcer, then knee-high offloading devices followed by footwear modification is to be advised. So to summarize, as you can see in the chart, if the ulcer is non-plantar, consider removable high ankle foot orthosis. If the plantar heel ulcer, consider the high knee ankle foot orthosis as an offloading device. Then in case of plantar forefoot or midfoot ulcer, if the infection or ischemia is present, then for mild infection or ischemia, we are supposed to be knee-high offloading devices. And if the moderate or severe infection is there, priority should be treating of the infection followed by offloading. And in case of non-infection ulcers, then the standard mode of management is non-removable knee-high offloading devices followed by as mentioned previously. Then third guidelines or third chapters is management of peripheral arterial disease in patients with foot ulcers. This is quite important and interesting because though no matter what type of dressing or what high-end dressing you are using, if the ulcer doesn't get adequate blood supply, diabetic foot ulcer are never going to heal. So these important recommendations are to be followed. The very first and foremost is examine the feet of all the patients annually for the presence of peripheral arterial disease. Then clinically examine all the patients with diabetic and foot ulceration for the presence of peripheral arterial disease. Then clinical examination is not reliable, so exclude peripheral arterial disease with the help of pedal Doppler or ankle systolic pressure or systolic ankle brachial pressure index or ankle brachial plexus index simply, as you can see in the figure. Then consider urgent vascular imaging and revascularization if the person is having ankle pressure of less than 50 mm of Hg or ankle brachial index of less than 0.5 or toe pressure is less than 30 or transvenous oxygen pressure is less than 25 mm of Hg. Then always consider a vascular imaging in patient with a diabetic foot ulcer irrespective of the result of bedside test when the ulcer is not healing within 4 to 6 weeks. We can consider multiple various line of investigation modalities includes color Doppler ultrasound or CT angiography or MR angiography or intra-arterial digital subtraction angiography. Then in case of intervention, while performing revascularization, the revascularization should be aimed to restore the direct flow to the particular specific arteries which supplies the particular specific ulcer or anatomical region of the ulcer. Then we are supposed to do a risk and benefit analysis before doing the revascularization intervention and plan accordingly. Then urgently assess and treat the patients with signs and symptoms of peripheral arterial disease and a diabetic foot infection as they are at particularly high risk of major limb amputation. Then fourth chapter is guidelines on diagnosis and treatment of foot infections. So multiple and in-depth guidelines are essential, and so these guidelines have divided. This chapter is divided into basically three parts. The one is diagnosis of soft tissue and bone infection. Then find out the microbiology of causing diabetic foot infections, and then approach to treating diabetic foot infections as per the microbiology available and pathogens causing foot infection. So the diagnosis is basically soft tissue infection to be clinically based on the presence of local or signs and symptoms. Then consider hospitalization of all the patients with diabetes and severe foot infections, and those with moderate infections, that is complex or associated with key relevant morbidities. Then in a person of diabetes, we are supposed to find out the infection markers or biomarkers or inflammatory serum biomarkers such as C-reactive or ESR or perhaps procalcitonin. This shall suggest support the findings of infection as well as severity of infection as well as prognosis of the treatment also. Right. Then, in case of a person with diabetes and suspected osteomyelitis of the foot, if the plain X-ray and clinical and laboratory findings are most compatible with osteomyelitis, then no need of further imaging like CT or MRI. If the osteomyelitis diagnosis is not evident or not clinically established with the help of X-ray, then we can go for magnetic resonance imaging scan or acting FDG positron emission tomography or CT or leukocyte scintigraphy can be done to confirm the diagnosis of osteomyelitis. Then collect an appropriate specimen for culture. Then for soft tissue diabetic foot infection, obtain a sample for culture by aseptically collected tissue specimen, and in case of bone, we can have a bone biopsy or we can excise the bone and do the culture. For bone infection, collect a sample of bone that is percolated surgically to culture clinically relevant bone microorganism and histopathology. Then antibiotic sensitivity testing is to be done. The likely or proven positive pathogen and their antibiotic sensitivity is to be established for the clinical severity of infection and appropriate treatment accordingly. Then antibiotic therapy should be administered initially by parental route to any patient with a severe foot infection. For mild to moderate, we can go with the oral treatment, and for the severe infection, we are supposed to switch to the oral therapy if the patient is clinically improving and has no contraindication to oral therapy. So generally, they say that 1 to 2 weeks of parental therapy, and if you feel that infection is getting settled down, then you can switch over for oral antibiotic. For osteomyelitis or bone infections, the total treatment duration is approximately 4 to 6 weeks. Then do not treat clinically uninfected foot ulcers with systemic or local antibiotic therapy with the goal of reducing the risk of infection or promoting ulcer. This is very much important because most of the time for uninfected ulcer we use neomycin or many other antibacterial creams. That is not indicated. Then diabetic foot ulcers, treat the diabetic foot osteomyelitis with the antibiotic therapy for no less than 6 weeks. Then if the infection does not clinically improve within the first 2 to 4 weeks, then reconsider the need for collecting a bone specimen for culture, undertaking surgical resection or selecting an alternative antibiotic regime. For diabetic foot infection, we do not use hyperbaric oxygen therapy or topical oxygen therapy as an adjunctive treatment if the only indication is specifically for treating the infection. Means infected ulcer, hyperbaric oxygen therapy or topical oxygen therapy is not recommended. To specifically address infection in a diabetic foot ulcer, do not use adjunctive granulocyte colony stimulating treatment or do not use topical antiseptic or silver preparations, honey, bacteriophage therapy or negative pressure wound therapy. Then guidelines on to enhance healing of foot ulcer in person with diabetes. So the first and foremost thing is remove slough, necrotic tissue and surrounding callus of a diabetic foot ulcer with sharp debridement in reference to the other matters taking other relative contraindications such as pain or ischemia. Then do not use dressings or application containing surface antimicrobial agents with the sole aim of accelerating the healing of ulcer as I mentioned previously. Consider the use of sucrose octasulfate impregnated dressings in a non-infected neuroischemic diabetic foot ulcer. This sucrose octasulfate, in case of neuroischemic ulcer, high matrix metalloproteinase accumulation is there. So this sucrose octasulfate helps to remove this matrix metalloproteinases and increases the vascularization. Then systemic hyperbaric oxygen therapy can be considered for the use as an adjunctive treatment in non-healing ischemic diabetic foot ulcer. Then do not use topical oxygen therapy as a primary or adjunctive interventions in diabetic foot ulcers. Those are difficult to heal. Then consider use of negative pressure wound therapy to reduce wound size in addition to the best standard care in a patient with diabetes and a post-operative surgical wound on the foot. Then consider the use of placental derived product as an adjunctive treatment in addition to best standard care when the latter alone has failed to reduce the size of the wound. We can consider autologous combined leukocyte or platelet and fibrin as an adjunctive treatment in addition to best standard care in non-infected diabetic foot ulcer, that is PRP and other things. And the final chapter is guidelines on classification of diabetic foot ulcers. So a recommendation is to use the SINBAD system for communication among the other health professionals. SINBAD means site, I for infection, uh, N for neuropathy, B for bacterial, I for ischemia, N for neuropathy, B for bacterial infection, A for area, and D for depth. Then do not use any of the currently available classification scoring system to offer an individual prognosis for a person with diabetes and a foot ulcer. Then in person with diabetes and an infected foot ulcers, IDSC or IWGDF infection classification to characterize and guide infection management can be used. Then few things about the Indian guidelines. The standard treatment guidelines, that is the diabetic foot prevention and management in India, has been drafted by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in 2016. I have gone through the whole document, and these track and treatment guidelines are basically adopted. They have adopted international guidelines, but at the end they have concluded that if the international guidelines are not applicable to the Indian population, then they have mentioned the specific recommendations for Indian scenario. So it is available on the internet. It is around 116-page document. So any interested physiatrist can go through this. So let us have a few things about Indian scenario of diabetic foot care. Right. So currently in India, diabetic foot are treated by individual practitioners. In Western countries, there is a separate thing called podiatrist. Along with general physician, podiatrist does a lot of diabetic foot care. In India, there is no access podiatrist specific course, or there is no access podiatrist available. So it is divided into among the various multiple people practice diabetic foot care, like physician or orthopedic surgeon, general surgeon, female specialist, endocrinologist, diabetologist, etc., etc. But still, there is no interdisciplinary team approach, and very few diabetic foot care centers available in India. So I would recommend that uh, being a PMR specialist, we have extra advantages as compared to the other professionals I have just mentioned. Then this includes, other than these all six, like prevention advice or offloading, prevention advice, treatment of infection and other things, all the six things which I have mentioned in the guidelines. Other than that, we have upper hand in understanding of biomechanics of foot. We physiatrists have in-depth knowledge of offloading techniques and have knowledge and experience in the treatment of ulcers other than diabetic foot ulcer, like pressure ulcers or other things. So this knowledge can be definitely helpful for the management of diabetic foot ulcers. So what is essential to excel in diabetic foot care? We need a good certification or fellowship program by IAPMR post PG. Then there should be more emphasis on MD and DMD curriculum about diabetic foot care, although it's still there. But on practice, every teaching institution should have a specific dedicated diabetic foot care unit. Then there should be more hands-on workshop in CME and conferences, and we should invite other team members or other interdisciplinary team members like vascular surgeon or a general surgeon or plastic surgeon, or whoever is the expert in the diabetic foot care management. And we should have more coordination and academic association between other Indian associations working in the diabetic foot care. So with this, I would like to thank you for the organizers and thank you for listening to my talk. Thank you very much.